Okay, today we are going to finish chapter 19 of Matthew and read through chapter 20. This should be a relatively straightforward session because I don't think we'll be quoting any Old Testament scriptures this time around, since everything that is discussed in this material is pretty straightforward and explainable from the material itself, for the most part. This is on the way to Jerusalem. All three Gospels record the stories that we're going to be reading about here. Matthew, of course, has more teaching in this section than Mark or Luke do, but Mark and Luke both have parables to these accounts of Jesus' trip to Jerusalem as he gets nearer to the city. Now a man, this is Matthew 19, starting in verse 16. Now a man came up to Jesus and asked, "Teacher, what good thing must I do to get eternal life?" So this was a young man who was trying to earn his way to salvation by upholding the law. This is what Paul would talk about extensively in some of his letters. Right, and Jesus doesn't go into the detail that Paul does in his epistles, but Jesus does make a point to say this. "Why do you ask me about what is good?" Jesus replied. "There is only one who is good, that be God. If you want to enter life, obey the commandments." Now Jesus simplified here what Paul will take multiple epistles to explain, that none of us are good. No one is good. And Jesus is communicating this message to the young man, to this individual, by saying, don't call yourself good. Why do you call me good? It's like, don't call yourself good. It's like the only one who's really good is God. Now Jesus, of course, claims to be God on multiple occasions, but the point that he is making here is to get across to the young man, don't think that you're good. Don't even think that I'm good. Obey the commandments. "Which ones?" the man inquired. He's trying to justify himself. As Job would have said, or the friends of Job would have said back in the book of Job, he is right in his own eyes, and he wants to get validation for that from Jesus. "Which ones?" the man inquired. Jesus replied, "Do not murder, do not commit adultery, do not steal, do not give false testimony, honor your father and mother, and love your neighbor as yourself." These are basically the last 6 of the 10 commandments, the ones that involve person-to-person conduct and not person-to-God conduct directly. "All these I have kept," the young man said. "What do I still lack?" So again, back to Job, he is right in his own eyes. He thinks he is righteous. Jesus answered, "If you want to be perfect, go, sell your possessions and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven, and then come and follow me." Now again, this is not going to buy his way to salvation by doing this. Again, we're going to have entire books in the New Testament that are going to go into this concept in much more depth. But this conversation here is getting to the heart of the matter about you can't buy or earn your way into eternal life. You must humbly come and follow Jesus, which does go back to what he said again on the Sermon on the Mount. Let's go back to those characteristics, and let's see what this young man is not. He is not poor in spirit. He does think too highly of himself. Being poor in spirit means don't think too highly of yourself. Acknowledge your debt before God. This young man is not acknowledging his debt before God. He thinks too highly of himself. He is not poor in spirit. "Blessed are those who mourn," and we mentioned when we read these Beatitudes that it doesn't necessarily mean like mourning someone's death or something like that. It really means more about having a mournful attitude over your sin. This guy does not have a mournful attitude over his sin because he doesn't think he's committed any sins. He is right, self-righteous. He is right in his own eyes. "Blessed are the meek, they will inherit the earth." The humble. This man is certainly not humble. "Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled." I guess you could say this guy does hunger and thirst for righteousness, but it's a self-righteousness. He believes he is right in his own eyes. I guess you could say he's not totally off on this one, but his righteousness is a self-righteousness. Blessed are the merciful, for the Lord will show mercy. We really don't have enough information about him to say anything about that. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Well, this guy was not pure in heart. He went away downtrodden. He left Jesus and went away sad because he put his possessions and his money ahead of wanting to see God, being pure in heart. We really don't have enough to know about information about him to know about whether he's a peacemaker or persecuted, so we can't say about that. But this guy did not have the characteristics that Jesus discussed at the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount in terms of the sort of attitudes that one should have in order to be a proper member of his kingdom. So to do that, he was going to have to get rid of the stuff that was in his way, his possessions, his pride in his belongings, and really also his pride in his own self, his own sense of self-sufficiency and self-righteousness. He was going to have to give that up and follow Jesus, and he was not going to be able to do that. Maybe later in life he did, who knows. Apparently he was a younger man here at this point in time. Maybe someday in the future after this, he did. Probably not. But he wasn't able to do it now. When the young man heard this, he went away sad because he had great wealth. Then Jesus said to his disciples, now everything, this is one of those instances, we're going to have a chapter break here. Matthew chapter 20 is going to start like in the middle of Jesus' explanation here. And this is one of those instances where the chapter break is not in a good place. Because and again, remember, the chapters and verses weren't in the text originally. They were added by translators many years later. And they generally are in good spots and are helpful for organizing the text into chunks that make it easier to reference and remember and find and all that. But there are times when the chapters are not divided correctly, and you have instances where a chapter break is kind of put in the wrong spot, and it's easy then for modern readers to think that the sections before the beginning and before and after the chapter break, at the end of the previous chapter and the beginning of the new one, are not together, but they are. And this is one of those instances. There's going to be a chapter break here in a few verses, but this whole block of material all goes together and should not be divided up into a chapter. So anyway, Jesus is now going to use this. This young man is going away sad. Maybe someday he'll come back. Maybe he's going to go home and think about what Jesus said. Maybe he's going to hear the news of the crucifixion and then the rumors of the resurrection and then the apostles' ministry afterwards. Maybe someday, maybe he'll sit and think about it, and maybe he'll meditate on it. Maybe eventually the message will get back to him and he'll be willing to do it. Maybe. But he's not willing to do it now. He's not going to do it now. So Jesus is going to use him as an object lesson. By the way, Mark says, we didn't read it here, but when we read it, we read that Jesus looked at him and loved him. Jesus did not want him to go away sad, unable to accept his truth, but he told him the truth anyway. And so he's going to use him as an example to his apostles, to teach their disciples, to teach them something they need to know. Then Jesus said to his disciples, I tell you the truth. It is hard for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. It's hard, honestly, for anyone to enter the kingdom of heaven. But this lesson in particular is about rich people. Again, I tell you, it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of God. I don't think we need to try to explain that statement. He's making a point. He's using hyperbole. It's hard. On their own, they can't do it. And really, in all honesty, this applies to all of us, because none of us can actually... This young man was trying to either buy or earn his way to salvation, and none of us can do that. Now, rich people may be more tempted to think that they can. They have the resources to buy what they want on earth, and they may be more tempted, therefore, to think that they can buy their way into heaven or earn their way into heaven. So in that regards, it may be more difficult for them. But honestly, this really applies to all of us, because we're all on the outside looking in initially. And the only way any of us can get in is through God's help. When the disciples heard this, they were greatly astonished, and asked, who then can be saved? It appears as though the apostles and many of the audience that Jesus was speaking to at this point in time believed in what we would call a sort of prosperity gospel, a prosperity theology. This is very common today, okay? This sort of teaching infiltrated the Western church in the middle of the 20th century and has been devastating, I believe, in its negative effects for the last 60 or 70 years. The idea that if God loves you and you're doing what he wants, he'll bless you. And that blessing means material blessing. Now, there are plenty of passages in the Old Testament where he speaks to the Israelites or even speaks to certain individuals and says, if you do what I command, I will bless you. And there are examples of him doing that. And so it's easy to see how that can then be twisted into believing, well, he'll bless you materially no matter what, as long as you are faithful to him. And it can be hard to kind of shake yourself from that belief. And it appears, we'll see, we said before, as Jesus has been trying to teach them about humility in the last couple of chapters and what it means to be a true servant in the kingdom and be therefore truly great. The apostles had a typical, glorious view of what it meant to be in charge in the kingdom, and that is like they're going to be in control and they're going to have all the authority underneath Jesus. And that meant being able to tell people what to do and being in rulership positions. And the actual practical method of how that worked out is not what they thought or what most people think. And so it appears as though they were thinking of a material blessing here. And so when Jesus says, so in their minds, as again is common today, this young man would have been blessed because he was faithful, because he was loyal, because he loved God. Like that's why he was rich. And so Jesus is not saying that's not the case, and it's even harder for rich people to get to heaven than it is for anybody else. It's like that would go against what they would have supposed throughout their lives. So they asked, who then can be saved? Jesus looked at them and said, with man, this is impossible. But with God, all things are possible. Anyone can be saved with God's help. None of us can be saved on our own. You don't have to be rich or poor. None of us can actually earn or buy our way to salvation by ourselves. But with God, all things are possible, so anyone can get in with God's help. Peter answered him, we have left everything to follow you. So they've done what Jesus told this young man to do. They've already done exactly what he said this man should do. So what then will be there for us? Jesus said to them, I tell you the truth. At the renewal of all things, or at the regeneration, when the Son of Man sits on his glorious throne, you who have followed me will also sit on 12 thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel. So they are going to get out of life what they put into it. If they follow his commands, if they live his lifestyle, they will get what he's promised them. He will be on the throne and they will be on thrones. And everyone who has left houses or brothers or sisters or father or mother or children or fields for my sake will receive 100 times as much and will inherit eternal life. But many who are first will be last, and many who are last will be first. So the kingdom is going to be topsy-turvy and upside down. Those that you would think would be getting in first and ahead of everybody else are going to be last, like this rich young man. And those you think would be getting in last would be at the bottom of the list, such as these poor, broke beggars, because they have no jobs now. These homeless guys wandering around in a group who've given up their careers and their fields. They're going to be first. For the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner. This goes with the previous section. There's a chapter break here in our English Bibles, but this thought continues with what's already been said. This is not its own unit of material. This has to be seen, this parable, this section here has to be seen in context of what we just read. This is the second half of the story about the rich young man. He's gone. He's not in this part. This is a parable about him, parable about this principle that's being taught here. But this is a follow-up to the rich young man account. So it's not its own separate block of thought. For the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire men to work in his vineyard, day laborers. This was very common practice back then. Still is to some degree today. He agreed to pay them a denarius for the day, that was the day's regular wage, and sent them into his vineyard. About the third hour, which would be 9 o'clock in the morning our time, he went out and saw others standing in the marketplace doing nothing. He told them, "You also go work in my vineyard, and I'll pay you whatever is right." So they went. He went out again about the 6th hour, which is noon, and the 9th hour, which is 3 p.m., and did the same thing. About the 11th hour, which is 5 p.m., which is right near the end of the working day, he went out and found still others standing around. He asked them, "Why have you been standing here all day doing nothing?" "Because no one hired us," they answered. He said to them, "Then you also go and work in the vineyard, my vineyard." When evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to his foreman, "Call the workers and pay them their wages, beginning with the last ones hired and going on back to the first." The workers who were hired about the 11th hour, so the most recent add-ons, came, and each of them received a denarius. So, when those came who were hired first, 12 hours ago, they expected to receive more. But each one of them also received a denarius. When they received it, they began to grumble against the landowner. The landowner, of course, is God. In these sorts of parables, the landowner nearly always stands for God. There may be one or two parables that Jesus tells, a couple of mainly in Luke, where the landowner is wicked and is an example of a wicked landowner doing wicked things. But for the most part, in these parables, the landowner stands for God, the owner, the master. When they received it, they began to grumble against the landowner. "These men who were hired last only worked 1 hour," they said, "and you have made them equal to us who have borne the burden of the work and the heat of the day." But he answered one of them, "Friend," he considers them his friends, not just his workers, "I am not being unfair to you. Didn't you agree to work for a denarius? Take your pay and go. I want to give the man who was hired last the same as I gave you." See, he wants to give the guy who came in last the same opportunity as the guy who came in first. Don't I have the right to do what I want with my own money? Or are you envious? Do you have an evil eye? Because I am generous, or because I am good. This goes back to the good. Who is good? This guy is good. This guy is claiming to be good. Do you have an evil eye because I am good? So this is God. This is what Jesus, again, connects to the rich young man story. This is the one who is good. So the last will be first, and the first will be last. Now this story, like I said, this parable, goes into the context of the conversation that follows after the rich young man account. So you have to consider that when you study this parable, because it's part of that. It explains what he was talking about when he talked about the rich young man. The landowner, of course, is God, stands for God. The one who is good, okay. I'm guessing his foreman is his angels, the guy doing the work at the end of the day, at the end of the age, paying them all what they deserve, what he wants them paid. The workers are clearly people who get hired, who go out and do God's work at different times during the day. Now, I will admit, this is a tough parable for me. It's a tough parable for the disciples. I think it's a tough parable in general. It seems completely reasonable that the farmland owner pays the men what they agreed to be paid. I mean, you may not like it if you're the one who got paid first, that you're getting the same as the guy who got paid, who got hired last, but you did agree to work for a denarius. So that part I don't have a problem with. The ones who are out there who got hired at 6 a.m. and worked till 6 p.m., worked 12 hours and got paid the same amount as someone who got hired at 5 p.m. and worked 1 hour, and they all got paid the same, but they all agreed to get paid that. So that part I don't have a problem with, because that was the agreement, that was the payment they agreed upon when they went out there. What I don't understand, to me, what I struggle with here, is that it seems to me like the obvious lesson of this parable is to hide out in the marketplace until the last possible moment and then get hired to do the least amount of work. Like, that seems to me to be the takeaway here. And maybe that's just because that's my, comfortable, lazy, Western nature. I don't know. I really don't. Maybe if I were more of a go-getter and a do-gooder and a go Adam person, maybe I wouldn't think that way. But it's like my ears here. Well, the lesson here is to try to hide and not get hired first, and then get hired later, and then get paid the same amount while doing less work. Like, that's the lesson I take away from this. I think that the lesson that Jesus wants us to take away is that the Father, He and the Father, want to give everyone the same opportunity to work and get paid the same. I don't know exactly. He talks about the first being last and the last being first. And originally, when they were talking about the rich young ruler and asking who can be saved, that context seems to indicate, people who the first are the people in society that you would think would be the favorite ones because they are society's favorites. They're the upper class, the nobility, they're the elites. And we think that, well, they should get all the privileges. We expect them to because that's what makes them elite. They get all the privileges. And then the apostles themselves, the disciples themselves, apparently had the mindset that, well, this guy is rich because he's been blessed by God, and he's been blessed by God because he's been faithful to God. So therefore, he's rich because he's been faithful to God. And again, that's a very common attitude. Rich people throughout all of history have had an attitude that is some version. You can go all the way back to the early days, early human civilization out in Mesopotamian deserts, and the guys who claimed to be rulers at that time claimed to be sons of God, either representatives of God or sons of God or the God, whatever God they believed in, or God Himself, whatever God they believed in. Say, I am this God, or at the very least, I'm representative of this God. And rulers and nobility and elites and rich people have been using that line of defense ever since. I mean, that's been going on all throughout human civilization. Like, I'm the one in charge because I'm the one favored by God. And we're seeing that creep into our society here. We didn't have that for the most part for much of our history. Now, we still were always ruled by an elite class that deemed themselves blessed by God because they were good. I mean, that was very common in the 1800s and the 1900s. And now we're seeing it in the form of they think they should be in control because they're just smart. Like, they're just the smartest. That's always gone with humanity. Like, the ones who have the elitism, who have the money and the power and the influence, think they have it because they deserve it. And that's just been how human beings have operated since before the flood. I mean, like I said, that goes back to Genesis 6, where it talks about the sons of God coming for the daughters of men. And as I said then, I believe the sons of God there. Some people will tell you that those are the good guys marrying bad guys. I think that's the bad guys who are claiming to be sons of God fighting each other for who is supreme amongst men. And that's what led to the earth being full of chaos and violence. So that's been going back since before the flood. It's been going back all throughout human history. So it starts off that way, that's who we're thinking of when we think of those who are first, the ones who we put first, the ones who put themselves first, and society just goes along with that. But then it does talk about them all working in the Father's field, which seems to indicate these are all going to be members of the kingdom. So, like, they're all going to be in the kingdom. I don't think this rich young man is going to be. In the context of this overall story, it doesn't seem to me like the rich young man is going to be in the kingdom, so it seems to me like he wouldn't even be there. Like, he wouldn't be hired to work in this field at all. Like, he just wouldn't be there. So in that regard, it makes it seem to me like we're talking about God is going to grant every believer, every member of His kingdom, the same opportunity, the opportunity to receive the same payment, regardless of when they came into the field to work, whether they were there early or whether they were there late. Like, whether they were one of the original 12 disciples or whether they are one of the last converts to Christianity that come about before Jesus returns. That's what it seems like to me. But I don't really, it's hard to say exactly. Because again, to me, the takeaway of this lesson is, well, I'll just hide out in the shadows of the marketplace until the day is nearly done and get hired when there's only an hour left to do anything. And I'll get paid the same as those suckers who are out there at 6 a.m. and they got paid the same. Like, that's the takeaway. I want to be honest. That's what I hear. To me, that's the lesson of that parable. I'm sure that's not the intended lesson, but that's what I take away from it. So there could also be some idea of the original workers or the earlier workers in the vineyard are the ones who were like the faithful Israelites in the past, who are jealous that new people are being brought in to work in the kingdom now. That's possible too. It might even be the intended meaning. I honestly can't say. This one's always been a little tough for me. I've done the best I can to explain it here, and I think I've explained it as well as I know how in the last few minutes. But the other possible interpretation is that the early, because it seems like everyone who's been working in the vineyard is going to be in the kingdom. So I don't think we're talking about the first in the sense of those like the rich young ruler who are just not going to be there in the end, are not going to receive payment from the master at all. It seems like everyone who's getting paid here is a member of the kingdom, and just some of them were there earlier than others, which could be faithful Israelites of the past who were working in the vineyard before the church got formed, or before the apostles, or before anyone. I honestly don't know. So that's the best I can do with that material. But there is no complaint for getting paid what you agreed to work for. Okay, that's clear too. You went out there at 6 a.m., you worked till 6 p.m., you got paid what you agreed to get paid. Now that may make you less likely to want to work for that guy again. And again, like I said, without doing the strategy I suggested earlier, but like that's not the issue here.